Were you aware that the state was storing your child's DNA?
No.
It's a state secret.
Do you think you should have been aware?
Absolutely.
Storing newborns' DNA without parental consent.
There's no reason to be doing experiments on a child's blood without the parents knowing.
What it means for your family's privacy. A courageous survivor confronts her harrowing past.
The bruise on my belly area, tussling with me to the ground. I had to block him on several phone lines.
A staggering statistic that underscores a pressing crisis among the African American community.
Is it me, or is it the precedent that's being set because of the way I look?
Camouflaged cameras monitoring your every move.
The bad guys are ahead of us.
What they're after and how you can stop them. Around the country and in your community, CBS News puts the stories that matter in focus.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Maurice DuBois. Over the next half hour, we will travel across the country to uncover stories that have a major impact on our lives. And we'll talk with the storytellers as well, who've dedicated their work to elevating these issues front and center. We begin with an investigation into your DNA. You'll likely know about genetic testing companies used to track family ancestry or birth origins. Those companies have to get your permission before storing, using, or selling your DNA. But your state government does not. In fact, when you were born, DNA samples are taken without parental consent in almost every single state for uses like testing for diseases and research. Our CBS News data team confirms only Wyoming currently requires a formal parental consent in advance. And in California, they are storing DNA from every baby born and won't say who else is using it. Lawmakers are now pushing for transparency. But as CBS News California investigative reporter Julie Watts shows us, they are facing an uphill battle.
He was very, very cute, very adorable baby, and he has a lot of hair.
Ronnie's dad has wonderful memories.
Perfectly healthy.
Of seeing his son for the first time. What happened next was an afterthought. Like every baby born in the state, little Ronnie got a heel prick shortly after birth. His newborn blood filled 6 spots on a special card used to test babies for dozens of congenital disorders that, if treated early enough, could prevent severe disabilities or death. A couple of days after taking their seemingly healthy boy home from the hospital,
We got a call.
they learned Ronnie's heel prick revealed a rare genetic disorder called SCID.
He was diagnosed with no immune system at all.
It's known as the bubble boy disease. Ronnie's first infection could have killed him. Instead, he was rushed to UCSF, where he received life-saving gene therapy and where he met Dr. Puck.
I could never have developed a newborn screening test for SCID if we hadn't had stored dried blood spots.
Dr. Puck created the test that saved Ronnie's life. It was the first developed using extracted DNA from leftover blood spots stored in California's massive newborn genetic biobank. You see, doctors only need a few spots for the baby's own life-saving genetic test. The rest becomes property of the state. California has been storing blood spots from every baby born here since 1983 and can now test newborns for more than 80 rare disorders, thanks to research using those blood spots. California's amassed the largest stockpile of blood spots in the country, one of only a handful of states that stores them indefinitely without asking for parents' permission.
Were you aware that the state was storing your child's DNA?
No.
Do you think you should have been aware?
Absolutely.
And therein lies the concern. Instead of getting permission or letting you know you can opt out of storage or research, California sends you home from the hospital with a pamphlet and points you to a website with more information.
I feel like that's something that should have been discussed with us in person.
Everyone who came into our room gave us like another pamphlet.
Blood is inherently or intrinsically personally identifiable.
Public records we obtained in 2010 revealed blood spots are also used by law enforcement. We found at least 5 search warrants and 4 court orders for identified blood spots, and that was before the Golden State Killer case made genetic genealogy a common law enforcement tool. Since then, from cold case murders in California to a cold case rape in New Jersey, law enforcement is using blood spots to solve crimes committed by parents before their kids were born. But when we recently asked the California Health Department for an updated list of research and law enforcement requests, the agency denied us, saying it's no longer tracking that information like it used to, and it's not required to create a record telling us who has access to our DNA.
What are they trying to hide?
From consumer watchdogs Jamie Court to genetic detective Cece Moore.
People have the right to choose how their DNA is used and how their children's DNA is used.
For years, everyone from privacy advocates to lawmakers have warned California's secrecy could ultimately harm the biobank. Several states have had to destroy their blood spots after being sued for storing them without consent.
That's a travesty.
And many believe California's biobank could be next.
We need to find ways that parents can consent without harming research.
And that's what some lawmakers have been trying to do. In fact, 3 different Senate committees passed a bill last year that would give parents the option to opt out of storage and research before the state stores their child's DNA. But the full Senate never got to vote. Why? Money in politics. You see, the state health department claimed it would cost millions to give parents that right. So the bill was sent to something called the suspense file, where in a budget deficit, expensive bills go to die. Even though, and this is important, it wouldn't have cost taxpayers a dime because researchers pay for the program. So now there are 2 new bills. One, prompted by our recent reporting, would require the state to publicly disclose who's using California's blood spots. The other would require the state to get your permission before storing or sharing your DNA, just like consumer companies already have to. But the powerful medical lobby worries too many parents would opt out if given the choice.
Rona wouldn't have existed today if the treatment was not there.
Ronnie's dad supports parental consent and the biobank.
That's the key here.
Thanks to other babies' stored blood spots, Ronnie's not only surviving, he's thriving.
And Julie Watts joining me now from Sacramento. Julie, so eye-opening and so many layers here. Let's see if we can get into this from every possible angle. Let's start with the legislation. Where does that stand right now?
So one of the bills that we just told you about has sailed through the legislature with widespread support, but it was just sort of suddenly amended to take out the part where the state would be required to reveal who is using the DNA for research, what that research is, and how it benefits public health. It does still require the state reveal how many blood spots are being used and how many research projects are being done, but it's been watered down, and that the privacy advocates definitely have some concerns about that.
So, Julie, how did this come to be in the first place? Who decided, hey, let's do this, and people acquiesced? Did they not know? Was it done in the dark? How did this come about in the first place?
You know, Maurice, there's a nationwide genetic testing policy where every child born gets this really crucial, important genetic test. And I do want to make sure that that is clear, that the test itself is life-saving, very important. Somewhere along the way, certain states and their departments of public health decided that they could start storing these through regulation. It wasn't law, at least not in California. And so the head of, in our case, the California Department of Public Health wrote into regulation the ability for this biobank to be created, for them to start storing these samples. And there's also a funding mechanism, right? The researchers then pay to get those samples, which self-funds this biobank. So it was created through regulation, not through law. It didn't go through the lawmaker process. They're now working on that, trying to sort of write this into law. At least that's my understanding of some of the amendments going into this latest bill. But yeah, it was created through regulation by the heads of these public health departments.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I mean, it's done so much good overall, right, from a public standpoint. Even though you may not want to share your DNA, it's done tremendous, tremendous benefit.
Right, and I think that is the concern from that. I know that is the concern from the medical lobby. They're concerned that if parents knew the state was storing their child's DNA, they would want it destroyed. But the medical community relies on this DNA to do very important research to create new tests and find new diseases and new cures to help save children. So, you know, there really is a circular argument here, right? You want to make sure that the DNA is stored, but the question remains, should parents have the right to know it's being stored?
Let's talk about your personal connection here, Julie. How'd you first get on the trail of all of this?
Well, a lawmaker back in 2015 introduced a bill about a year and a half after I gave birth to my now 11-year-old, and I had no idea. And I'm an investigative reporter. I research everything. I had a multi-page birth plan, did not know my child's DNA was going to be taken and then stored. And I figured if I didn't know, I wasn't alone. So that sort of set me down the path for our initial investigation. And then when I got pregnant with my son a few years later, I knew there would be a follow, Maurice. And so, in fact, the video that you see in that story of the the newborn and the blood spots. That's my son. Those are his cries. And it was an interesting experience to be using video of your own child while you're editing a piece like this. But through as soon as he was born, I had my husband wheel me into the room. And I used him to really dive deeper into this, right? So not only did we get the video, but I was basically interviewing the nurses there, asking what they knew about this process. And not surprisingly, even the nurses in the room didn't realize that his DNA samples would be stored indefinitely in a state-run biobank, could be sold to researchers without my consent, and law enforcement could access them with a court order. And that really is the purpose of our investigation, not to imply something nefarious, but to ask the question, should parents have the right to know? Should the entire medical community have the right to know what is happening with these newborn blood spots that we are told are being used for our child's own genetic tests?
And that is the central question. Julie Watts, thank you. Intrepid reporting, excellent work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
And if you have a tip for Julie, you can email her at jwatts@cbs.com. In Focus continues right after a quick break.
Still ahead, a dream relationship turns into a nightmare.
My abuser is stalking me at my home. He's waiting to catch me alone to physically assault me.
Her fight to escape violence at home, and why this issue is affecting more black women in one popular city.
Welcome back. The statistics are alarming. An average of 24 people every minute become victims of domestic violence at the hands of an intimate partner in the United States. In Chicago, CBS investigators found that black women account for 65% of all female domestic violence victims. CBS News Chicago investigative reporter Dorothy Tucker takes a deep dive into those numbers and explains why black women may be more targeted by those they love.
I was with this individual for about 3 years. He was literally a girl's dream, anything you would want in a man.
But 18 months into the relationship, Precious Wright wishes she'd never met the man she thought was a girl's dream.
Just a good angle. Yeah. So these are some of the photos, the bruise on my belly area, tussling with me to the ground.
There were also threatening messages.
I had to block him on several phone lines.
And when she didn't respond, the angry ex broke her car windows or showed up for an unwelcome visit.
Precious, let me in. Precious, I know you up there. I know you up there.
In 2023, more than 20,000 women were victims of domestic violence in Chicago. And listen to this, 65% of them were black, like Wright. Between February 2020 and March 2021, Wright practically had police on speed dial.
50?
50.
At least 50.
But when it came time to press charges.
So I went to court the first time, and that's when I dropped it.
You dropped it?
Mm-hmm.
Refusing to press charges happens all too often among domestic violence victims. 25% of all women drop them, and some, like Wright, take the abuser back.
Very strategic, very manipulative. His I'm sorries would be huge I'm sorries. It would be, let's go to the Virgin Islands, I'm sorry. And I would get suckered back in.
A lot of women just live with it.
The question is why? Gabrielle Molden-Carwell is a trauma therapist with Resilience, a nonprofit that supports abused women and children.
A lot of people don't know, like, where to go or who to call or like the hotlines.
And sometimes when they do call, Molden-Carwell admits financially strapped programs may offer limited support, forcing some to stay in abusive homes.
And my family is just as poor as I am, and they can't uplift me and now 2 children. I'm stuck.
Then there's the race factor.
Those who do report, the police don't have the best responses to. I've seen people say, well, they laughed at me, or they didn't believe me. And so if society don't believe that I'm being abused, what's wrong with me? Is it me, or is it the precedent that's being set because of the way I look, the melanin in my skin?
I am a survivor.
Wright was fortunate. She could afford to move out of her apartment and leave her abuser. In 2021, she sought this order of protection, writing,
I have been dealing with abuse and stalking for the past year.
Describing in detail why she desperately needed it.
And I kept trying to fix the situation on my own. My abuser is stalking me at my home. He's waiting to catch me alone to physically assault me.
The 2-year order was granted.
And the message to other women?
Be resilient and be strong and don't give up.
And Dorothy Tucker joins me now. So maddening, frustrating, disheartening, makes you angry. Dorothy, what is a woman to do, like the first step? Where do you turn? How does that work?
You know, we spoke with the expert that you saw in the story, and the one thing that she kept saying to women is that they really just need to make those phone calls, like the organization that she runs. If a woman were to call anytime and say, I just want to talk to somebody, I don't know what's going on in my life, I'm afraid, I just want to be there, all of those services are free. And it's kind of like Precious said, one of the most important things to do is to not give up, is to talk to as many people as you possibly can, again, to look for help and to search for help. And, you know, I mean, let me just, again, put this in perspective for you. We're talking about a city of Chicago where 16% of the people who live here are black. 16% are black women. 30% of the victims are black. And so now let's look again at that domestic violence. 65% of the women are black women. I mean, the numbers are alarming.
And you've been working on this story, at least a string of stories like this, a series of them, since 2023. And with all the data, all the reporting that you've done, how has the city there responded? Have they made any changes to address it?
You know, we haven't gotten a lot of response from the mayor yet, but I literally saw him a few days ago, and he promised me that he would sit down with me. But we did have a town hall, and we had an opportunity to talk to the Chicago Superintendent of Police. And he acknowledged that this is a huge problem. He admitted that sometimes some officers perceive black women in a way that is disrespectful, and that they sometimes don't acknowledge their cases, and they don't really listen to them, and they don't treat them and give them the kind of services that they give other women. And he said, as of this point, that he is talking about training, providing training for officers, and not just 8 hours of training where they do that one day, one time. He wants it to be consistent training where they learn to sympathize, they learn to empathize, they learn to treat black women like they should be treated. Now, he made that statement, he made that acknowledgement to me back in April. October is that 6-month mark, and you know I am going to follow up. I'm going to go back. I'm going to see where they are to make sure that they are indeed carrying out the acknowledgement and the promise that he made.
Let's hope the work gets going. Dorothy Tucker, great work.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And if you are a victim of domestic violence, help is available. Just call 800-799-SAFE or text the word BEGIN to 88788. And In Focus, we'll be right back.
Up next, cameras hidden in the bushes, helping thieves know when to strike. Details on this alarming trend and what you should be looking out for. And the beloved birds of the North Woods are facing a serious threat. Why these majestic birds are shrinking in both size and number.
Welcome back to In Focus. Police in several states are warning about camouflaged cameras hidden in yards. In suburban New York, a homeowner found one similar to these in their bushes while doing yard work. But as Tony Aiello reports, it's been happening across the country.
A Scarsdale homeowner doing yard work found a surprise in the shrubbery. Police say it was a camera, similar to this one, camouflaged with fake greenery and hooked up to a cellular hotspot to broadcast surveillance video to parts unknown.
They're ahead of us.
The bad guys.
The bad guys are ahead of us, yeah.
Steve Samtor says it's concerning to his neighbors. Scarsdale police are getting help from the FBI and Homeland Security, trying to find who's behind the hidden camera.
The group is generally from South America, the group that we are investigating.
Lieutenant Steve Delbenny says video from a camouflage camera can help burglars monitor opportunities to break into homes or steal vehicles.
Criminals have taken advantage of the technology of the day to make it a little bit safer for them to monitor potential homes to be burglarized.
Police in California have been warning about camouflage cameras for several weeks. Near Boston, a camera was found hidden in shrubs outside a home, and 3 people were arrested after they allegedly used the camera to time a break-in for when the family was away. Back in Scarsdale, many residents have been checking the shrubbery for hidden surveillance cameras.
I think we will, and in general, the Scarsdale will be more vigilant because of this.
In a message to village residents, Scarsdale officials said police searched the rest of the Bradford Road neighborhood and found no additional hidden camera devices.
You always want to monitor your property for any sort of unusual things that might be going on.
Because someone might be monitoring you. In Scarsdale, Tony Aiello, CBS News, New York.
In order to stay safe, police said homeowners should keep all exterior doors locked using deadbolts, keep the garage door closed and locked, secure the garage door opener, always activate the alarm system when you're away from the house, and use motion sensing exterior lighting. Before we go tonight, we take you to Minnesota, where there's a growing effort to save a beautiful bird known as the icon of the North Woods.
It is a big deal around here. When the chicks hatch, you know, it's loon watch.
At 1 month, a loon chick used to weigh about 3.5 pounds, but research shows the loon is literally shrinking in numbers and size. Now they weigh closer to 3 pounds. Why? Experts say climate change, more frequent and intense downpours wash things like fertilizers and sediment into the water, making it murky and hard to hunt. The rain and heat also allow black flies to thrive, a pest that drives loons away from their nests.
Parents simply can't keep themselves alive and feed the chicks enough to keep those chicks growing.
It's really disturbing because it's such a part of our habitat.
If you want to help, researchers say you can stop using lawn fertilizers. Planting or keeping native shorelines provides healthy habitat and clearer lakes, and building nest rafts can help as well. This is just some of the work our colleagues at CBS News and stations are doing. More than 5,000 people, many of them behind the scenes, living and working in the cities you care about. Around the country and in your community, CBS News puts the stories that matter in focus. Until next time, I'm Maurice DuBois.